Hey everyone, we've got a pattern change coming to the United States. For the past couple of weeks, we've been dealing with some low pressure systems bringing in some really cool temperatures into our country. But I really do think in the end of January, going into February, we're really going to start to see that change where we have less of these blues across the country and more of these reds. So I think we're going to be entering into a little bit of a higher pressure regimen. It's going to bring some warmth and potentially some severe weather to come back into the United States. And then also, there's still going to be some chances for some snow as well in the northern United States. Let's kind of break down what our long-term pattern is looking like and what we can glean from it. First, looking at our long-term models, our averages, this is the GEFS. Essentially, the reason why the GEFS ensemble is different from, say, the GFS, which is a deterministic run, is essentially this. The GFS is pretty much just one model. Going out into the future, it kind of just goes on its own line, and where it ends up in terms of accuracy and inaccuracy really just depends on where its biases are at the time, and that can change with different weather events. Some weather events the GFS handles better and some not so much. With an ensemble, you have not just one, not just two, but 30 different points of initial starting conditions, giving you a range within that accuracy and inaccuracy, allowing people like me to kind of see what the average is like in between those ranges. And it's a really helpful tool, especially in the long term, because the deterministic models really suck at seeing those long-term patterns, but the ensembles with that as averages kind of gives us an understanding of what could generally be in place. And as weatherman and meteorologist, we take that information, the common patterns, pretty much imagine what could happen with those potential patterns using pattern recognition. And that is easier with an average than it is with just one single model. So this is the GEFS, which is an ensemble here, and you can see that on average across the country, we're going to be in a low pressure regimen, really from the 24th going into the 25th, but eventually we're going to start to see some of these ridges up here, especially down here in the southeast, kind of keeping a lot of our low pressure systems over here in the western portion of the United States. Now, one of the things that the models are picking up on is eventually a low pressure system kind of diving down into California, and eventually that's going to just kind of meander and track a little bit further to the east, while a high pressure system really starts to move across the northern United States and the eastern United States as we get into the 30th, where I'm definitely thinking we're going to be seeing a warm up. Most of the cooler air that's going to be slingshot by this high pressure system will be well off to the east, or there near Greenland, maybe a little bit over there in the northeast. But down here, we've got to watch out for this low pressure system to develop, because whenever you get a low pressure system here with a decent amount of warming out in front of it, sometimes that can spell disaster when it comes for areas like the southeast, because that low pressure system is going to be bringing that cooler air from the north down into the Rockies. Maybe Lee cyclogenesis happens. We get a organized low pressure system down here, bringing up some heat from the Gulf of Mexico and some moisture. It's a perfect recipe for some severe weather, especially for the southeast. Now you can see generally the GEFS has this on its model run here. So let's go and look at the Euro model as well. See if there are any agreements within our averages here. So the Euro model has that low pressure regimen sticking around, also has that low pressure system diving down into the western United States that eventually tracks off to the east into the southern plains. And it's not as strong as a signal, but it does bring generally a low pressure system over the Rocky Mountains down into parts of New Mexico, bringing in a low pressure system down here. And again, these low pressure systems really just swirl up the atmosphere. They're kind of the great equalizer between the cold and the warm air. So we're going to be getting some cooler temperatures in the north, going down into the southeast, interacting with those warm and moist air. And that's going to be a recipe for severe weather. So definitely watching out for that potential. And even though it's going to be warmer than average, we're still going to be seeing some frozen grounds, frozen soils, and potentially some freezing temperatures in the air as well, which means that whatever low pressure system still comes into the United States, we still have a chance for snow, but I really do think that's going to be further up to the north. We'll be looking at some of our deterministic runs here in a little bit. But first, I want to look at the shear. Now, shear is important mainly for thunderstorms. As a thunderstorm builds and grows and turns into a mature cell, how much shear and what direction that shear is going is important. In the upper levels, we look at the 500 millibar level. In the lower levels, we look in the 850 millibar level. Typically, we look for south, north winds in the lower levels, and then west to east winds in the upper levels. These are kind of like when you put your hand in a bathtub and you make a swirl. Pretty much what's happening here with the winds in the thunderstorm is it interacts with the updraft of the storm. And once these winds interact, the updraft starts to twist. And if you have just the right surrounding conditions as a thunderstorm matures, that's when you get a tornado. First, starting off with our upper level winds here on the GEFS, you can see that as this low pressure system dives down into the western coast and then pushes into the southern plains, we do have some decent winds a lot. It's not the craziest signal I've ever seen, but we certainly do have some upper level winds coming out of the west going to the east here, really over here near Texas, and then eventually pushing into areas like Louisiana and southern Alabama, going into Georgia as well. So the upper level winds could potentially be there if this trough truly ejects into this area. Now looking at the lower level winds, which again, this 850 millibar winds are important, you can see that generally, yes, we do have some south to north winds as that trough ejects, but really not a whole lot. You can see that they're a little bit on the weaker side with this storm. So this is, we're going to be watching this area for an uptrend. If we get one, we could have more moisture transport, stronger forcing near the surface, and a little bit more spin if we start to see this increasing as we get closer and closer in range. Now keep in mind, this is the average here, so it could be a little bit higher, but definitely seems like some severe weather could be possible if these signals do hold. But given the nature of this low pressure system, you see how it's kind of attached here to this low pressure system initially and then splits off as it moves into the southern plains. This is kind of a small scale feature in terms of the big picture here. So typically when we get these bigger low pressure systems and we have agreement on that, it's hard for those to fade. But these little low pressure systems, even though we do generally have a model agreement, they're pretty subtle, and a lot of small changes could impact this storm's trajectory quite a lot. In fact, if this ridge is just a little bit stronger and pushing down a little bit further to the south, it should mainly eject out over the Gulf of Mexico and not really be too big of an issue. If the high pressure system is a little bit more to the north, up to its north, then this could go up into the Great Lakes and maybe cause a little bit of a bigger snowstorm up there. There's still a lot of uncertainty on what's going to happen, but generally it does seem like the pattern could support the return of some severe weather down into the southern plains in the southeast, and also potentially some snow up there. So let's go look at our temperature anomalies across the United States according to the averages here and see what we can glean from there, and then look at some of our deterministic runs and see what's possible there as well. All right, so generally, as we go into the 24th, 25th, you can see that's going to be still cooler than average in the southeast, up in the northeast. But you can see we got a lot of warm air, warmer than average air moving into Canada. And then now that's going to eventually be pushing into the United States. We're going to be seeing some more cooler air try to hang on there, but eventually that warm air is progged here to win. A little bit of a battle there at first, but eventually that warmer air, warmer than average air, is really kind of overtaking a lot of the United States here. And as we get into the end of February the end of January going into February, most of the United States could be above average. And there's actually a little bit of an agreement here between these two models. You can see generally cooler there in the southeast and the northeast, a little bit of a battle between that warm and cold air. And then as we get into the end of January, going into the beginning of February, you can really see that warmer air starts to take over the United States. But given the fact that we still have that battle going on, a low pressure system could easily sneak in here and try to develop a snowstorm somewhere in the Ohio Valley moving up into the northeast, especially given the overall background pattern that we have with some low pressure regimens staying around for just a couple of days to a week before this higher pressure system really dives down into the United States, bringing some warmer air. Looking at our future radar here, you can see that as we move into the 27th, a little bit of rain is going to be possible there. Doesn't look like a whole lot of snow is going to be happening unless you live up here in Michigan going into New York over the next couple of days. And then eventually we start to see that low pressure system develop down here in the southern plains. A little bit of snow on the northern side there as well. And eventually tries to push up to the north and east, bringing a potential snow event up here into parts of Nebraska, going into Minnesota and the Great Lakes region. And you can see we have heavier precipitation down here in the southeast. So definitely kind of fits the bill of the kind of storm we were looking at. Eventually an organized severe weather event down here with some snow to the north. Let's go look at the Euro and see what it's thinking about on its deterministic run here and compare and contrast on what both of these models are saying. So get some snow and some lake effect snow up there in the Great Lakes, another snow event up there, a little bit of rain down there in the southeast as we move into the 27th, and then eventually we get this storm developed. Now, you can see not as much snow on the northern side, a little bit there of rain. And eventually, you can see that the Euro is saying more of a disorganized low pressure system down here in the Texas, Louisiana region. Some snow coming up there into the northern Great Lakes. And then eventually, the Euro forms its own little low pressure system a lot later than the GFS down here, bringing potential for some severe weather. And on the northern side, you can see that that eventually transitions into a pretty heavy snowstorm, potentially a nor'easter there, but that low pressure really deepening off the coast with a lot of snow potential up there in the eastern Ohio Valley, going up into the northeast and New England with some lake effect snow on the backside. So now you can see we kind of have two different scenarios. The Euro is a little bit further to the south, the GFS goes a little bit further to the north, but you can see any low pressure system is going to be possible all the way down here from Texas, all the way up into areas like Missouri and Kansas, and those impacts will spread to the east northeast with this kind of pattern that we are expecting to come into the United States. So I really do think snow chances could still hang in there in the end of January up here in the Great Lakes, going into the Ohio Valley in the northeast. And then generally down here in the southeast, it's going to be a little bit warmer, and that's going to bring some chances for severe weather. In terms of weather warnings that we have out there right now, we do have still some lake effect snow happening over here in Michigan. We got some winter weather advisories out there. Another 2 to 3 inches could be possible. We also got a winter storm warning up here near Traverse City, where we could expect anywhere from 6 to 12 more inches over here. So watch out for that. Lake effect snow is going to be a problem pretty much all day up there. Same up there in UP of Michigan. We're expecting 2 to 4 inches more of snow there. And we do have some winter weather advisories over here for some of the lake effect snow there in Pennsylvania and New York, where another 2 to 4 inches seems to be possible down there. Then up a little bit further to the north, 3 to 5 inches still possible up there. That's going to be near Watertown, Oswego, and this one over here is near Buffalo, Jamestown, and Salamanca. Some passing snowflakes could also be possible over here, and that will eventually be moving off to the east, but it'll probably dry up as it interacts with the mountains. Maybe a couple of snow squalls can't be completely ruled out in this region, but probably we won't see too much more accumulation. Still have red flag warnings over here in Pennsylvania. Not Pennsylvania, California, all the way from Santa Clarita down into Riverside, Escondido, Oxnard as well. We actually have a fire up there. Monitoring the Hughes fire over here. Right now it's at 10,000 acres. Really not in a very populated region, but it did shut down the Interstate 5 here for a little while, but as far as I know, that's been allowed to reopen. Winds will definitely increase today going into tonight, so we're definitely expecting some more fire growth here. Really watching out for this thing to be able to spread into this region here, very populated regions, really close to where this fire is spreading. You can see in these orange areas, there's definitely some potential there. I'll be monitoring this tonight. Might go live for it if my schedule agrees with this fire's behavior. We shall see. Still messing with my computer a little bit, but I think I've cleaned it up enough to get it to function for a live stream. As of right now, it is 14% contained with 10,000 acres burnt. And this fire started yesterday, indicating that this is a very fast-growing fire, and it'll probably grow fast today, depending on how much progress the firefighters have made. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't hit that like and subscribe button, and I will see you guys on the next video. Peace.